And this is a very important day for us. This is for the third time that we are going to announce the results of our measurement when it comes to the access to the innovative medicines within Visegrad Group. So we are taking into account our local contexts. For us, it's a kind of ceremony where we, as a Polish organization, have the possibility to brag and to boast what we've prepared, and we are hoping this will be very useful for both patients and the decision makers, and it will be a tool which will enable to draw the conclusions which hopefully will translate into the situation of Polish patients. Also, we as in pharma, we have been monitoring this situation on daily basis, and you have both the reimbursement radar, with which we are following the local situation, but also in V4 countries. And in June, we'll have wait results. So where do we stand when it comes to Europe? We are keeping our fingers crossed in every single field. And we encourage you to use the platforms which are very much user-friendly. And we also encourage you to take a look at them and to draw some conclusions from it. And without any further ado, we would like to extend a warm welcome to this event. Both you in the room and also those who are connected remotely. And with that, let us start. And I wanted to get it over to the most important expert who has been supporting the preparation of Access Gate and Polish Radar, Magdalena Wodysiuk. Let me welcome you to the third edition of GAP. And of course, the reimbursement radar was a bit later, but the two tools that you can see, please go to our website. And of course, it is being updated. We encourage you to monitor these websites and tools. And in the discussion, we would like to ponder how to develop this and what kind of extra information we could contain. Maybe we could do a lifting of GAP next year so that it would make additional information available. Now a summary of 3 years. The index in GAP is quite complex in comparison to weight, but this is deliberate because we wanted to take a look at the first aspect, access to drugs and medicines, and also access to diagnostics. They are compiled in one index and doesn't only tell us whether a given medicine is available, and there are full indications for this to be reimbursed, or whether there are restrictions, but it also tells us how many patients have an access to the therapy. So we are analyzing the reimbursement from the previous year, given the 4 countries of the region, and we also take a look 2 years back to see how many patients actually have an access. So thanks to this third edition, we can see this progress, which is resulting not only from the access to the medicines, but also the distribution of therapy. We wanted to show you that in a very simple way. A green color is a low gap, so in comparison to what is being registered, and vis-a-vis what is available, and the more violet the color gets, the lighter color, the situation improves. Violet means a low access, and this is where we face biggest obstacles with an access. What we can see when we take a look at 2022-2024, Poland has improved its result. This is the largest progress. Well, in Hungary, they also have made some inroads, but Poland was the best in terms of improving over the last 2 years, and we can boast. We'll see whether this trend will continue, but of course the question pertains to all the questions in the region. The Czechs are the leaders, not only in terms of the access to therapy, but also the time of the access to therapy. So having this leader, we can compare ourselves to this leader. What we can see when it comes to the time, unfortunately, this access time in our region has lengthened. So we can see that we are increasing the access. The processes take longer. Yeah. And somebody could argue, in Poland it is improving. The average time is, the worst. But let's hope that the changes will improve the situation. What you can see additionally, the situation of Poland from 42 to 58 over the period of 2 years. This is a big change. Czechs, they are maintaining a similar level, even though they improved by 19 positions, so they continue their trends. Hungary, the largest change over the last 12 months, and the whole region has improved the situation, which means that all the countries, even though we thought that Poland has a lot to make up for, but it seems that the situation in the region generally has been improving. When we take a look in detail on the specific areas, because the previous result was general, we take a look at oncology, chronic and rare diseases. Well, in Poland, oncology continues to be a priority. We also see an improvement in rare diseases, and we can say they are on the heels of the oncology. When it comes to chronic diseases, the situation has been slightly improving, but only slightly. The fact that we set certain priorities, we maintain that. The question whether we should not think about changing the balance between the priorities. As you know, the chronic diseases are some selected diseases. We are not analyzing all of them under GAP. When we take a look at the results, cystic fibrosis is the leader. Parkinson's disease continues to be a deficit area that continues to be so, and despite the fact that we introduced some drugs to diabetes, the situation is not wonderful. But you can see examples of improvement in certain indications. Here we show you the biggest leap in terms of the ease of access to diagnostics and therapies, but you can also see the hematology, leukemia, and in these cases and other therapies, we have smaller changes. So we have a smaller improvement in the access. When we take a look at, and you can take a look at the websites to see individual indications. Well, the Czechs have changed their methodology of presenting data, so the indexes also fluctuated, and the resultant change of the color, generally speaking, from what we see, cystic fibrosis, in the majority of the countries, we see an improvement. So even though we say this is a rare disease, a lot of therapies, relatively expensive, we see an improvement in access in every single country. What we are trying to measure is not part of the GAP. This is an additional slide. We have been carefully analyzing and thoroughly analyzing how many patients actually have an access to the therapy, and these additional data are being verified among countries. When we take a look at the breast cancer, you can see that breast cancer over the last 12 months, we've seen an increase of the number of therapies. This is the largest improvement, and you can also see how Poland has improved from 52 to 63, and the time of the access to therapy has also improved. in accordance with the guidelines, but also an access to early therapies, which is also very important. We've improved the access to the molecular diagnostic tools and methodologies. When we take a look at some deficit area, diabetes, the lowest access, the lowest improvement, unfortunately. In Poland, you can see this gap from 31 to 34.3, from 31.8. And the problem generally is that due to the large population of patients and the fact that the therapies are chronic, used over many years, we can see that all the countries of our region have improved the situation, but this improvement, for this reason, is still limited. When we take a look at some more specific data and certain indices and indications, you can take a look how the matter or issue of diagnostics has been getting better. Here you can see deployment rate. We have some deficit areas which can be clearly seen. So these are the areas where the number of patients treated is not large, connected with reimbursement restrictions, but also access time. So despite the decision being made, we can see that the access time is not relevant and it's not sufficient. So I urge you to take a closer look at every single case on this template. In summary, this presentation does not show you all the data, but we are operating on the assumption that there is an improvement to the majority of therapies. We still continue to face a lot of challenges, including common diseases, which we don't consider to be priority. But when you take a look at the individual indications, there is no equality between common diseases and others. We've mentioned diabetes, rheumatology is lagging behind. That also brings the question about the strategy on the medicines and reimbursement of medicines. The time from the reimbursement to the actual access, this is another important consideration. And the final question, how to change this situation in case of the so-called common diseases? Thank you very much. Okay, now it's my turn. Hello again. And I would like to use this opportunity to welcome the Minister Miłkowski from the Ministry of Health and other representatives of our Ministry of Health. And we are very pleased because the Ministry of Health has been with us since the very beginning. We invited you. We presented the concept of our first Access Gap tool. And we had an opportunity to share this tool with the Director Oczkowski, and quite frankly, the changes that we've seen, the positive changes, can be credited to these two gentlemen who has been working hard on these two reimbursement initiatives. And as a matter of fact, we can see the quality of this cooperation in the parameters on the high-level map. The result of weight, also in the V4, but also we are hoping that especially for you who are the experts, for patients, the Polish reimbursement radar may be another very useful tool. And the idea was to present an analysis which will not crop up once per year, but it will give you an opportunity that whenever we announce the list, one can take a stock of what's been happening in the reimbursement decision-making process. You can also take a look at certain descriptions prepared by the Ministry of Health, but this radar gives you a retrospective tool at individual areas, and you can draw conclusions. You can see what are the priorities. You can see what the ministry is prioritizing. So it is not only a tool which enables you to take an annual look, but 4 times a year. Now, when it comes to the information, we have a number of layers which are very interesting. Let's take a look at first. It covers 698 technologies registered since 2015, and we can also brag and boast that over the years that we take it into consideration, 9 years, we have almost 700 new molecules, new therapies for patients. So this sheer number should be very impressive. In many other discussions, it surfaced that it is very important in our medicinal product life cycle how important this 700 is, and this is a testimony to how well we are doing. When it comes to analyze therapeutic areas, we have a number of them, just like Magda already said. We don't have everything because some of the areas are very narrow. We have single individual substances, and so please bear with us. And when it comes to the most important ones, so the non-oncological rare conditions, oncological diseases, these are the groups which have the biggest number of registered drugs, and you can see where we have the largest emphasis when it comes to finding new substances. We have infectious, chronic, civilizational diseases, and we had to apply a certain methodology, rheumatology, dermatology, cardiology. Well, the importance of innovation, why do we even talk about it? Novel therapies, no new therapeutic methodologies gives the patient the chance to live longer, to live better, to better control the disease, to be able to reverse some of the diseases. I'm not even referring only to incurable cancers, but also diabetes. From the clinicians, we hear that the new therapies enable us to reverse the state of health, to improve the quality of life. Personalization of the therapies, it enables us to target individual patient. Sometimes we are quite similar, but there are these biochemical differences which matters for the kind of therapies. So far, we didn't have, despite the development of the technology and science and the expenditures on innovations, there is still many diseases which are not well taken care for. I'm not only referring to rare diseases in psychiatry, in neurology. We continue to have the challenges, and the research does not enable us to find all the effective therapies. And another slide reiterates this point. And we have to remember that the improvements of the patient state does not only translate into the length of their life, but also how the economy is doing, how the GDP is doing, because every person who is ill, is on medical leave, cannot support the economy. When it comes to 2023, as a matter of fact, we have this positive change when it comes to access gap. We have 59 technologies which are covered by reimbursement in 2023. 44 were registered in 2 categories. When it comes to this circle, the idea is to get to the center of this circle. Then it will be 100% of the accessibility. So when you take a look at these circles, the closer to the center, the better. Just plain and simple. When it comes to the areas which are best taken care for, it's oncology. We've already flagged this. Rare oncological diseases, rare non-oncological diseases. Rheumatology is also worthwhile to pay attention to, but also cardiology and transmissible diseases. It continues to be a challenge for a pharma industry and the ministry. When it comes to the speed, the pace is quite good, increasing, accelerating. We are keeping our fingers crossed that over the next years the trend continues, because only when the number of decisions is larger than the new registered drugs, we will see the shift on the map an increase of the accessibility over the coming years. When it comes to the largest improvement, gynecological cancer, breast cancer, for example, when it comes to chronic autoimmune diseases, we have seen 3 new therapies, rheumatology, pulmonary and metabolic diseases.
Rheumatology remains a challenge. As regards percentages, they are important and they show where we are, what progress we have made. So we have 233 reimbursed out of 700 registered. That is 33%. I mentioned cardiology, only one of the novel technologies out of 17 approved, and rheumatology, where 60% of substances are reimbursed. This is not easy to read, but when you start clicking it on the website, it comes to life. And one of the important things for you is for the green bar in the lower part, it becomes larger than the dark one on the top, because that is a sign of improvement. The number of dots here is the number of substances. We're showing it to you in order to give you a more legible presentation. The percentage of reimbursement, rheumatology leads, and cardiology is in the back burner, but infectious diseases have come upwards. For ladies, it is new substances in cervical cancer and non-oncological rare diseases have their med technologies, and these are the modalities of measurement. Non-oncological rare diseases show a change in percentage terms. The same holds true for chronic diseases. In oncology, there is a cross-section here of all years. How many substances have started to be reimbursed? 64 substances since 2015. More have been approved. We're at the 50% mark, but there is a progress since 2015. It is hard to notice that looking at every single list as it's published, but if we look at it in a cross-sectional approach, we see and understand. So now in 2024, we are higher than the Czechs were 2 years ago when we started our measurements. As regards diabetes, we still face challenges. All of the time, we still discuss whether the whole population will have access to all the molecules. We have not registered the kind of success here that holds true for oncology. And there is a better access. This is a population-wide disease with a large number. That is a challenge. The same holds true for cardiology, and here the challenge is even higher than in diabetes. And barriers to reimbursement, we have had the opportunity to discuss that with the minister on many occasions. Not all indications are reimbursed. However, we also notice that there is even progress here over the years. These populations, new populations were taken on board, and time here is of essence. A lot of work to do in that sense, but hopefully next year at the subsequent edition we'll be able to showcase some shortening of the access time. We are the fourth from the end of the list in the weight index, which is a European-wide measurement. We have administrative barriers. We discussed that at length in relation to the reimbursement law. Contracting by the National Health Fund is a problem here. Cystic fibrosis was mentioned here. Decisions in 2020, or from 2020, have given us the opportunity to see some change in a multi-aspect, multifaceted approach as late as now. And financing, we want to access the 17% mark rather than depart from it downwards. And we are seeing that the National Health Fund is getting a bigger budget, but the number of, or the percentage of money earmarked for reimbursement does not grow. Innovative drugs are manufactured away from Asia, so to say. In that way, patients have guarantees of access if they are reimbursed. And here we have a breakdown into regions, but as in pharma, we are members of the Innovative Medical Alliance together with EFPIA, and we keep discussing on how to increase access. But when it comes to challenges, the key is not only looking backwards, but also looking forward. The Polish population is aging. Our population is the fastest aging population of all European countries. 65% of persons aged 65 plus have at least 2 chronic diseases. We have a growing incidence of cancers. We need tools to tackle that, diagnostic methods, and we need openness, candor in discussions between the regulator, ministry, and the pharma companies. If we start understanding each other, we stand chances of meeting unmet needs. Hopefully, the tool that we have developed, the online tool, will be helpful. It will contain information somewhat different from what you can find on the ministry websites and other websites. And hopefully information about access to innovative drugs will be a support for you. Thank you for your attention. I hope that debates that we have scheduled for the later part of this meeting will add to what I've said, but hopefully the tools that we have prepared will be helpful for you in your daily work. And now we invite our moderator, who is with us for the whole time. Well, thank you. You have stolen my line. I'm very happy because the ministers, the Ministry of Health, is with the project from day one, just as I am. Well, the personal makeup isn't changing, but discussion points are also not changing. Hopefully, the expenditures for reimbursement will change. I'm looking at Minister Miłkowski, who is smiling cordially to me, perhaps because it's not his problem anymore. But, well, Director, maybe you can stay with us if you like. There'll be room for you. Maciej Miłkowski, Undersecretary of State in the Ministry of Health. Please join us, Mr. Minister. We will also have Professor Piotr Rutkowski from the National Institute of Oncology, remotely connected, the president of the Polish Oncological Society, Konrad Rejdak, the president of the Polish Neurological Society, head of the department, teaching department in Lublin, and the Medical Institute of the Ministry of the Interior, here, Department of Hematology, and we also have representation of the Polish Diabetes Society. We have just learned that Professor Kostera-Tłuszczyk will not be with us, who is the head of the department, teaching department of rare neurological pediatric diseases. But we also have Madam Warnecka from the University of Opole, Magdalena Władysiuk, who is the head of the board of Pharma Consulting, and we also have the representative of Inpharma. Yes, we have Magdalena with us. I thought she had gone under the radars, not necessarily the reimbursement radars. My name is Katarina Hedar-Brosiecka. I'm very happy to be a friend of this project from day one. And this is a moment where I cannot start any other way than looking at Mr. Miłkowski, whose departure from the ministry is a national tradition. So are you more proud of what you have achieved, or are you sad because of the gap that you have not been able to bridge? Well, I'm happy with the fact that we have been able to do so much, because we can never be fully successful. I said that multiple times. Health is an area where 100% does not exist, and we are not able to provide the exactly same level of care throughout Poland. Not all patients will have the level of care according to guidelines. So we are happy having access to or achieved what we have. We also have to look at our resources, the resources of the whole healthcare system. These are limited. You're talking about finance, but also the headcount, but also the Health Technology Assessment Agency, the National Health Fund Agency, or National Health Fund has their personnel limits, and healthcare personnel is also limited, and the expectations of the pharma industry overshoots those resources. So we are all trying to do our best, but certainly more can be required from every actor. Are you leaving anything to your inheritor, so to say? Well, Marcin left a slip of paper for me to start with. I have not yet prepared my slip of paper, and there is a lot of work. Two things, first and foremost. One great big task, new reimbursements, which date back to before 2015, because the underfinancing there is daunting, because the Parliamentary Act was not prepared to cover this problem, and this is a change that certainly has to be addressed or performed. And also we see that we need to constantly improve the law in many aspects, including the reimbursement aspect. The legislators are working on that, and also we need an improvement, ongoing improvement of the information system. At the ministry, we already see a lot of data, but the pharma industry does not see the data. Data are not published in terms of reports of expert groups, which are also required by now. We are to receive the first data for last year regarding therapeutic programs, This remains a challenge, but thanks to the publication of our data, the reports that we are mentioning now, or discussing now, looking at these, we can compare ourselves and identify gaps and take a comprehensive view of the whole sector, because if we don't understand the facts, we don't know what to improve. So that's a fact too. So we are in constant contact with the sectors of the industry, working on groups of indications, what remains to be done, because the industry says that they have an important product. Everyone says that. But honest experts that we have voice their opinion, even though they collaborate with the pharma industry, but they are our experts, and they have their opinions whether this is pure gold or just gold-plated. Well, yes, everybody has their opinion, the minister. Yes, let's look at the facts, because there are areas that make us happy. One of these elements is oncology. Professor Rutkowski, please take the floor. Can we hear Professor Rutkowski? Ladies and gentlemen, the last year brought important changes in lung cancer, urothelial cancers, breast cancer, large bowel cancer, melanoma, and skin cancers, and hematology. And we have bridged the gaps, and the basic therapies are accessible. Sometimes the reimbursed therapy requires the participation of the patient. We only have a 20% coverage of HPV vaccination, where our neighbors have 70 to 80%. That depends on us. The right patient pathway taps the offer that is given by the innovative industry. Poland is at the 19th position in taking advantage of clinical studies where patients have access to novel therapies, and clinical study support centers have been established, and this is also a stage of innovation that we need to bear in mind. It is much easier when a patient earlier received novel therapies and then they are approved and reimbursement. Everybody is already familiar with that treatment, and they are more ready to use it. In my area, melanoma, there are important changes because we have access to all Category 1 treatments for disseminated melanoma, anti-LAC and anti-PD-1. So the access is really at a level where some countries can be envious. Yes, many countries can be envious, said Professor Rutkowski, but Minister Miłkowski said that he wants to hear what the industry still needs. So I will now look at Professor Hus. Are you as optimistic as Professor Rutkowski, or do you see some deficits? Thank you. Yes, I share the optimism. In the recent years, not in the last year, because that's not possible. New approvals are being made all over the world, including the European Drug Agency. And when I see Minister Miłkowski, we always say thank you, because it is he who changed a lot. I have been in hematology for years. Earlier, there were no talks with experts. There was no way to express an opinion which drugs are most important. And looking at stats, I was surprised because in hematology things are going well when it comes to access to technologies. I see that notable specialties enjoy the same situation, but there are many new approved drugs, but not all of them. Even when we look at the drug monograph, and it turns out that there are few schematics to apply. Those are expensive drugs. All of them are, and nobody can have all of it. We have to select patients very judiciously, looking at whether the patient really will get the benefit that we're counting on, whether toxicity will not be excessive. So these new therapies are not free of side effects. We are very grateful, but we can never claim to have everything because there are still patients who need new therapies. There are still groups or diseases where the progress is slower to come, and this always happens. It's not the time for me to list them now, but that's what we're talking about. There are new or further unmet needs in terms of therapies, and we just want the trend, the joint actions to be upheld. So the ministry, clinicians, and companies that submit requests. Yes, the problem shows through, and Dr. Oczkowski has always been underscoring that he wants to see the response of the other side.
What the professor has just said, that he's looking at NCCN in recommendations, and they have a larger lag period. So these American realities does not translate into Polish realities. But when we take a look at the most important groups with the first level recommendation, we have most of it. We can talk with a patient nowadays which therapy cannot have. We have a range of therapies, and we are talking about the preference of a patient. So this is incredible in comparison to what was a couple of years ago. And what also has improved when it comes to the treatment programs is that we are able to change them more quickly. I remember the first drug programs when the descriptions were inadequate, and we had to struggle in order to do it. So right now it's much easier, and where we have some specific needs is the supporting treatment in hematology. Patients are vulnerable to infections due to the disease and the therapies, and these are very expensive antiviral, antibiotic treatments, and sometimes we are subjecting the patient to allogenic transplant, and then we have to realize that we need to also ensure the supporting treatment when it comes to the infections. And that RDTL is a tool which, well, I can apply a drug program in a well thought over way, but RTDL, which is approved by the Voivod consultants, also please take into account the factor of time. When a patient is fighting with a life-threatening infection, he needs to be administer this therapy immediately, and if there is a problem with the application, we have to wait, and this patient does not have an extra time. So it's good that we have this tool, because we don't have all the medicines under all the drug programs, but I wanted to pay your attention to the anti-infection treatment. Minister, would you like to chime in? Do you see a perspective of ameliorating it? Well, access to the medical technology is quite good, but on our side we can see we not all the centers have this proper level of access, and not all the centers have signed the agreements. So For years, we were trying to make the treatment accessible and not this emergency mode on principle. Right now, we may not have done enough in this field, but we see that we are trying to apply diagnostic to choose the right path for the patient. And the second thing, the vaccination before we start the therapy, and also the package of vaccines which are dedicated to individual therapies. And this is what's missing. So doing a package which is targeting a given therapy, are we talking about it? Are you discussing it? Or will it be some recommendation for your successor? Well, we don't have a comprehensive systemic approach. We don't have the right qualification of patients. We need to modify this and change the path. Well, one sentence. If you were to jump into this discussion, please feel free to join. One thing which changed over the last year is that the patients following the transplant have the reimbursed vaccinations. It hasn't been the case for many years. The vaccines are very expensive. Of course, there is a larger group of patients who is waiting for the reimbursement, but the first step has been made. We made this arrangement with the Dr. Oczkoś that we'll be picking certain things when it comes to diabetes, where the situation is quite challenging. This is also a population-wide disease. What is this problem, not a program all about? I wouldn't be talking about the problem in the first place. We should change places with Professor, because diabetic experts are very grateful to the minister. We have our doctors who are singing praises for the director, and we have May 2024, and it seems that we will be talking before Miłkowski and after Miłkowski era, which is a great compliment to the minister. But we are hoping that maybe there will be even somebody succeeding you even better, but I can't imagine that. But maybe we should give an opportunity to the successor. Or maybe we are not sure whether you are living, you are departing. Well, this silence is very storytelling. So what is this before Miłkowski era all about? And after? It's not only the fact that everything changed in diabetic treatment, and the director said that cervical cancer was the biggest achievement. Well, I disagree. If we multiply the scale of incidence of cervical cancer, it's about 3,000 annually in Poland. In case of diabetes, it's about 3 million patients. And a decision made by the minister. In diabetes, for a dozen or so years, nothing was happening, absolutely nothing. It was just vacuum, and it's not a lament on my side. And when you say about these opportunities, we are trembling. One of the deputy ministers was saying, what's the problem with type 2 diabetes? You can treat it with drinking water. So this is very symptomatic for how it was treated. And also, there was this notion that diabetes type 2 is a complication of obesity. And well, this patient actually deserved it, so he does not deserve any reimbursement. So I would say that we should not treat HIV. Let's not treat lung cancer in the smokers, because this is also their fault. And well, the decisions were made then very quickly. I will not forget a meeting 2 years ago in July when we had Professor Strojek, the national consultant, and we entered the meeting with the minister and Director Oczkowski, and the minister said, "So what do you want? Just tell me what's your wish list." And I said to Professor Strojek, "Is it like a hidden camera? Is it like for show?" But it was a real dialogue. I just wanted to highlight one thing. It's not only that we have the drugs available to be reimbursed, but this dialogue was ongoing. And usually it would happen as follows. We would introduce a drug, then wait for the reimbursement, which would be expanded if it worked. And the minister was actually anticipating our expectations. I was very skeptical that the ministry will reimburse some diagnostic tools, but it all happened to our great surprise, and the situation is very dynamic. So I wanted to highlight that this discussion is not only somebody from the ministry speaking with the expert. We had this ongoing discussion, even when we had some differences in interpretation of regulations. We were approaching the minister with the patients' organizations, and within 2-3 weeks, we would get the interpretation that criterion for reimbursement of a drug like the level of hemoglobin is very important parameter, and we were quite distrustful. And we were getting the response, which was in accordance with the medical knowledge. Well, I will return to the question whether you see any deficit or needs. But I would like to pose this question to a professor who is with us remotely, because the breast cancer is well taken care for or not? Or do you believe that the gap has been bridged or reduced? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I fully agree with this notion. I can only echo Professor Witkowski's and Hus's statements, because in solid tumors we can also see quite an improvement, just like oncohematological area. And breast cancer, which was already mentioned during the presentation of radar, these are the therapeutic regions where much has changed. I just also wanted to say it will never be that we will immediately catch up with the reimbursement of all the new therapies. I will also confirm what Minister Miłkowski say. We had golden products and we had fake golden products, and a given product can be golden in a very narrow population of well-defined cohort of patients with regards to a certain biomarker. But if the same medicine is applied outside of this narrowly defined population, then it is no longer such a golden standard. It's no longer a silver bullet. So we cannot apply one measure to all these drugs, even if we hear an information that some medicines are available to a narrow group of patients that may result from the efficiency of a given medicine, that among all the cancer population in a given group, it is not giving the same efficiency. But when we narrow down this group under the clinical trials, then the advantage of applying this therapy is improving considerably. Thank you very much, Professor. Magdalena Wadysiuk, right. Is it right that we have these golden drugs and these fake golden drugs? Because we are also so obsessed with finding the silver bullet. Well, we have two point of views. We take a perspective from the point of view of research. If the drugs are registered, we can assess what the clinical practice tells us. We are focused on evidence, on real-time data, and we can compare more deeply at some subpopulations. But please remember, I think this is what the professor was referring to, that one thing is the subpopulation, but the second thing is the whole overall path of the patient. What has happened over the various years, we can see that in hematology, in diabetes, apart from the access to the medicines, we see some systemic changes, and the efficiency of the drug is contingent on the earlier stages. How fast was the diagnostic, when we administered a given treatment, and what the minister was pointing to, that we start to assess the assessment of the facts. I've been waiting for that more than 20 years to move from the discussion on the research to what we really see in the patients, to be able to respond properly, because we are gathering the facts not only to say that is it good or bad, but to inform the changes of the system. It's been 12 years since the reimbursement legislation passed, and we can say that Minister Miłkowski enabled us to enter the plateau stage when we see a continuous reimbursement, but also we are going through digitization of the system, the changes in CEZ, also the treatment programs that will give us an opportunity to take a more in-depth look what we can change in pathways in the access, not only from the standpoint of the big picture, but also regionally, locally. So we have this opportunity to have this very granular work. Of course, I will touch upon the digitization in the next panel and other mentioned things, but I wanted to respond to Professor Rajdak. Before we will be back, we'll circle back to diabetes, because just like in case of diabetes, you are also dealing with the aging of society, and do you believe that neurology is the actual priority? Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this invite to this important discussion. Answering the first question, are we a priority? Unfortunately not. We've been waiting for that for a long time, and we've been fighting for that, because looking at the demographics, we are looking at a huge challenge, and to make sure that neurodegenerative diseases are properly taken care for. This is a huge scale. The level of difficulty and complexity is huge, so we have to be well prepared. And we are very keen to make sure that neurology finally is prioritized, apart from cardiology, oncology, but also other very important fields, as the so-called social diseases, which are very prevalent, and but also rare diseases. Well, 2/3 affect the neural system, so we are really on the front lines. Thank you, Professor Minister. I'm once again referring to this piece of paper that you are going to leave to your successor. Will you add neurology to the priorities, and why it hasn't happened so far? Well, in large populations of, for example, multiple sclerosis, we would like to have this, but we can say that in terms of the treatment of epilepsy, we have huge needs, and also there's a narrow range of the operational treatment. But this is a slightly different area of treatment and diagnosis. In case of rare diseases, here we have the largest number of the ultra rare diseases, and we see the effects, but it will be much more difficult. I've always been saying that we are trying to treat it on the individual basis. We are trying to provide the financing, and in many instances, well, is it a priority? In case of rehabilitation, it's not, well, fully adjusted, but it's not on us, quite frankly. I don't know what therapies Professor is referring to, because apparently we haven't been talking often enough, but that may be a problem.
Well, Professor, you are remotely positioned, but you can still discuss. So the next issue, you asked about the approach or position vis-à-vis neurology as a specialty area. When it comes to reimbursement, I will join the previous speakers, thanking the minister. Much progress has been made. We have changed neurology like in oncology, hematology. The same happened in neurology. Therapeutic programs, access to therapies. This is a great change of a civilizational nature. So I fully second the words uttered by the minister that, yes, in multiple sclerosis and epilepsy, we have a whole new situation. I mentioned earlier that neurology should be a priority of health policy of the state. Reimbursement is an area which has had a very positive impact on the lives of patients, and we acknowledge that there are still areas that require improvement, but dialogue is of very good quality. We were always able to present our requests, our needs, and the communication process was ideal. Of course, we can always point out examples where the multiple sclerosis program can be improved. Putting many drugs on an equal footing, treatment of spasticity, use of botulinum toxin. There are various needs, various products that could be used in the same indication. We have certain rare diseases like myasthenia gravis, and this matter is in the process of work, and a certain group of patients will be able to access the most innovative therapies. Parkinson's disease was also mentioned in the report. Yes, we do have programs which are functional. However, the problem is access thereto and the implementation. What we're talking about all the time is the possibility of managing these programs. That is not up to Minister Minkowski, but financing of the execution of very complex programs boils down to financing the work of doctors, and this is where the barrier lies, that even if the program is there, the drugs are available, drugs could be reimbursed, there can be a problem of access to actual execution. Sometimes this is also with the patients, maybe they don't know who to approach, and this is what we ask for. We want expert centers to be singled out in the whole system. Also neurodegenerative diseases, including Alzheimer's disease, that should also be addressed. We know about approvals procedures ongoing. But this is maybe not the moment for commenting the submissions that have already been made. So on balance, we are in a very good situation when it comes to neurology. This is a revolutionary change, and in terms of reimbursement, and we have a big thank you to the team of the minister, and we hope that we are going to be able to continue our work in an open atmosphere, but we will continue to submit requests because they will emerge as neurology develops. And we are also going to ask for neurology to be earmarked as a strategic specialty. That is a request to the whole team at the ministry, but maybe also to the whole government, because we need to address the challenges. Well, hopefully the notebook of Professor Czupryniak is growing ever thicker. Yes, the professor mentioned the myasthenia gravis therapeutic program. Yes, it is relatively young, but the matter is interesting, a systemic challenge with new drugs for the first time made available in this indication, thanks to the cooperation with experts. When innovative drugs are analyzed on the motion of a pharma company. In this case, we have determined that patients can be very effectively treated with technologies that are no longer patent protected, no longer have exclusivity, which are well studied, which are accessible via pharmacies. And this project has taken on board all the older drugs, so to say, which have so far not been financed, and they should have been financed. But so it is in medicine that having access to a variety of technologies, therapies, and treatment lines, we can include into our practice the best trials, best studies where patients should be treated earlier. This was not the standard in Poland. The standard of care was low, and we were not able to test treatment lines. And the whole project of including the whole earlier process is very important, and this is where we're going to go in the unmet need area in this specialty. Well, Professor, we will hand over to you and to Professor Brynjak. That question relates to diabetes. Do you have any unmet needs here, which Professor Jankowski will be able to enter on his piece of paper? Well, we are here at a laudation here, which may turn out in future to be a little short-lived. Well, we are guests of Inpharma, and this is sometimes overlooked. We have, as experts, been talking both to the ministry and to the industry. And the minister was very, very effective in reducing the cost of therapy, which, of course, caused lamentation of the majority of our audience here. But that was a prerequisite of improving the chances for reimbursement. The minister is a tough cookie, and I saw sharks of the industry who had to take a step back. And so the new drugs tend to be overpriced. Well, the industry tries to sell new stuff as expensive as it can at an expensive price tag as they can. And this is not necessarily justified. Of course, there is also always some justification proposed, but I will not go into that. But there was some fighting back on the part of the ministry, but especially they were effective. It's not only about reimbursing new technologies, but when we have started talks with the minister for the past 5 or 6 years ago, we were in a binary situation. We had nothing, we wanted anything. And now we have access to the majority of new technologies, but we want that access to be improved. The ministry's method and our method is putting a foot in the door. Diabetes has always been a scare because there are 3 million persons ill with it, and there was a tendency, let's not reimburse anything because we'll go bankrupt, but they did not go bankrupt. And when it comes to our problems or concerns, whoever will be continuing after Miłkowski will say, Miłkowski did so much, why do you come to me now? So diabetology is very important. We are the steam engine of internal medicine. And this is also changing nephrology and cardiology, and we are also going to change the treatment of obesity, which has had no drugs so until recently. Yes, we can talk about reimbursing GLP-1 for obesity, somebody will think, okay, this is a nice weight-losing pill, but yes, treatment uptake is growing. But yes, there is pressure exerted, insulin analogs from day one in type 2 diabetes, Flozin GLP-1/2 in type 2, and glucose monitoring, blood glucose monitoring for all patients on insulin. There are good HTA reports to justify that, and we would not like to stop halfway because we have been elevated from the bottom, from the doldrums, but now we don't want to stop halfway. Monitoring glycemia and the GLP-2, GLP-1 drugs have also been really put in the center, in the spotlight, and new studies are emerging by the day. So this dialogue was ongoing all the time. We stopped looking at the ministry as a place we should not write to because they will not respond. They did start to respond, and they always went a step further than expected. So the process should be continued. I don't see us going back to the previous condition that the ministry starts thinking about tanks as a priority. Yes, of course, tanks are a priority. We cannot spurn that, but all the participants of the debate say that our appetites are growing. Maybe a laudation should not include this, but I don't think there are any decisions that you regret. There were no reimbursement decisions which were unnecessary, unwarranted. I think everything was thought through, and all of Polish medicine changed because we could have a different lineup of specialists here, and they would all sing praise to the minister. So hopefully that is maybe you can leave your desk every 6 months and we will have a laudationary meeting every 6 months, but maybe we will have an even better set here. So, Minister, I will let you take the floor in a moment, but I would just ask Dr. Bielniak about the tooth grinding matter, the irritation. Well, even before the reimbursement law, comparing that, the situation is different. So, yes, it is certainly difficult, but we are open to dialogue, and that has to be. And as the clinicians are underscoring, dialogue is there, and that's very important because submissions coming from the companies have to follow an administrative path, but a dialogue with the community is necessary, with the people who are actually the users, who know how to use it. That is very important. But from our standpoint, the fact that the minister was personally engaged for a discussion to be had, an economist had to learn about this. I'm a pharmacist, and I have witnessed what the minister learned. That is an enormous load of information that he had to internalize, and we can hear that whenever he speaks. So that's not easy in the talks with our members. The budgets are limited, goals are defined, and hopefully this hearsay is somewhat exaggerated, as has been on a number of occasions previously. So I see that even the non-growing level of reimbursement sums is also forgivable from your standpoint. Well, yes, the funds for reimbursement are secondary to decisions. If decisions are taken, the funds will change. And the slip of paper should stay on the desk. It should be long and point one is what should be, point one is the way to talk, is the way to discuss. We tend to focus on legislation rather than reimbursement, but there is certainly a major change. But the change did not occur due to the change of regulations. Yes, I want the minister to be the last speaker. But yes, I want to butt in responding to what you say. When we meet on the board of the Polish Diabetes Society, and Professor Strojek most recently said, "Oh, you're going to see the minister. Well, you really have to do your homework because he knows everything. He is so well prepared. No fuzzy messages will be bought by him." And we should not talk too much because the minister wants us to be snappy. Our previous contacts with civil servants were a problem. Yes, so maybe you could be snappy. Yes, this is self-irony. Yes, but this is a great. Of great value, but we have not only a strategic partner, but also someone who wants to talk about facts. Well, Minister, what's your decision? As you said, no telling what may be. It's the third time. No telling what will be on the fifth occasion. But the discussions with you, madam, are so well prepared because I think you're looking at things from exactly my vantage point. You are an economist, very well prepared. Well, this is not my laudation, Minister, but thank you. As I said earlier, I will say it again, when I was first appointed, I think the risk-sharing fund, which is not visible to anyone except the National Health Fund, that was about 200 million zlotys. But last year it was 1,050 million. Those are tremendous sums that is paid back by the pharma companies. And recently we also connected that risk fund with bespoke therapies, and the same should follow with medical device industry. But I think my follower will also work on increasing the range of innovative products in that area. Minister, is this our last meeting with you being in your role? I think so. but we don't really know what's going to happen in future, because as I have seen, I have always been working since 1997 on the medical market, and I think I can still work for another 15 years or so. So possibly we are going, yes, there will be many laudatory events. So thank you very much for this laudatory event. Dr. Magdalena Dysiuk, the HCL Consulting President of the Board, Professor Czupryniak from the Diabetes Teaching Department in Warsaw, Professor Niłkowski from the Ministry of Health. Let's see what happens next. Michał Byliniak, who is the General Director of Inpharma. Professor Konrad Rejdak, the President of the Polish Neurological Society, and Professor Iwona Hus, Head of the Teaching Department of the Medical Institute of the Ministry of Interior, Hematology Department. So in the V4 setting, we are now going to move further. The FPIA presentation is in the offing now.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Natalie Moll, and I'm the Director General of the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations, of which Inpharma is a very esteemed member. I'd like to thank Inpharma very much for inviting me to address the meeting today, where you will be hearing new data from the Visceral Group, very important data, and where you will be discussing also about the value of innovation, not only to patients, healthcare systems, but also to the economy. Before I start saying anything else, I'd like to congratulate Poland for its 20 years membership of the European Union last week on the 1st of May. What an incredible impact it has had, not only on Poland, but also on Europe, to have you part of this family. You have had an incredible development over the last 20 years, with a nearly doubling of your GDP per capita, which is so impressive, and also closing the gap with existing member states in terms of income, not only economically, but also health-wise. The health indicators that have been picked up by the OECD show that the life expectancy has increased, and deaths from cardiovascular disease as well as cancer have decreased substantially in Poland since joining the EU. Also importantly, you have increased your investment in health overall from about 6% to 6.8% of your GDP, while in general in other EU member states, this has remained stable around 11%. So a lot to celebrate in terms of improvements, but I can't say that the EU innovative industry of pharmaceuticals over the last 20 years has had the same level of success as Poland has had. In fact, over the last 20 years, on the contrary, we have seen the gap between European research and development in pharmaceuticals in the other parts of the world widen instead of narrow. There was about a 2 billion euro difference in terms of the amount of money invested in Europe 20 years ago for research and development of innovative pharmaceuticals. And now that gap is 25 billion. So you can see that other regions of the world, like the US, like Asia, have been attracting the investment for research and development away from Europe. What has happened also is in terms of clinical trials, there has been a decrease of nearly 7% in terms of clinical trials in Europe compared to other parts of the world. And in some of the most important areas like advanced therapies, which are cell and gene therapies, where most of the new medicines and cures are coming from, there's been an increase in clinical trials of nearly 200% over the last 20 years, but only 1/3 of those happen in Europe. And this is extremely concerning. Why? Because in these therapies, those are the ones that even during the clinical trials sometimes give results in terms of cures or incredible improvements in health. So there is a need to look at Poland, look at the ambition that you had 20 years ago and the policies that you put in place, and look at that at the European level when it comes to innovation in pharmaceuticals, so that we can close the gap I was talking about and make sure that we have the innovation in Europe to give us the products for our patients as quickly as possible, and that innovation cycle. How can we do that? There are different ways. At the moment, we have an opportunity that the Polish presidency of the EU will also look into. It's the revision of the whole pharmaceutical legislation at European level for the first time in 20 years. 20 years is a theme today. This revision with the right policy decisions can really make a difference in terms of the attractiveness of the EU. At the moment, we have an old regulatory framework of 20 years old, which is not adapted to new developments of technologies of today, but even of the ones of tomorrow with AI. So we need to update that regulatory framework and make it future-proof, make it attractive, make it faster to approve products. And then we need to make sure that we have the right incentives and the right framework that give investors an interest and a reassurance that investing in Europe is the right thing to do. We need to look at what other regions of the world are doing and be at least as good as them, if not better. This means looking at the whole innovation cycle from the research and development part, so having real EU innovation hubs like we have in the US with Boston or the UK, the Golden Triangle, making sure policies and funding that at the moment in Europe are a bit fragmented are much more focused, so that we have these innovation hubs for the research and development. And then we make sure that the middle phase in terms of incentives to develop products is very predictable and attractive with the right kind of intellectual property that is solid and even better than the one that we have today. And then we need to make sure that we have the digital transformation that allows us to benefit from all the data that we collect in Europe, but we are very many countries, so this data has to be interconnected. And at the end of the day, make the market access also very attractive and easy to follow, if you like, for all sizes of companies, so that patients really get the medicines when they need them. And this is something that, as I mentioned before, the Polish presidency of the Council will also look into. And therefore, Poland has an opportunity to shape the right innovation ecosystem for Europe and for Poland at that time. There are just two areas I wanted to talk about specifically that are very important. One is, of course, access. So innovation doesn't really matter if it doesn't reach patients. If it stays in a laboratory, if it doesn't access the patients at the right time, then it's meaningless. And I think all of us can agree that we need to work much better to make sure that there are no gaps between European member states or even between regions in member states for medicines to reach patients. And this is something that, as the innovative industry, we have focused on a lot over the last 2.5 years. We took a commitment last year to make sure that all our medicines approved at the European level were filed for pricing and reimbursement in all member states within 2 years of that approval. And we are following that filing to make sure that we initiate those discussions with member states and try and get the products to the patients as quickly as possible. Next to that, also we have the ambition of making sure that the medicines reach the countries at the right price, so at the price that a country can pay for that medicine. And this is a discussion that we can't have on our own, because in Europe we have a single market, we have different dynamics, but we have already committed to that concept, and we really look forward, perhaps even under the Polish presidency, to a discussion with member states, with payers, with other stakeholders, to decide how can we make that a reality? How can we make sure that each country pays what it can pay for medicines and make that access faster? So that's an important point that I think we have to keep in mind, because the revision of pharmaceutical legislation is not only about the regulatory process and improving it and making it more future-proof, but it's also about improving access at the moment. Whereas we think this access discussion needs to happen with member states, with stakeholders, very concretely outside of the legislation so we can make real, tangible progress. And the last element I wanted to talk about, I know I've been quite long, but it's important as well, is health technology assessment. This is another file that is being discussed in Brussels at European level. It is going to come into force on the 12th of January of next year, so it's very real. It's already been agreed as a concept, but now it will start applying as of January of next year to cancer products and advanced therapy products. And why is this important? Because again, this is a proof to the external world that Europe can streamline and can do European things. At the moment, you have 27 health technology assessments, so assessments of the value of a product, if you like. And here with the European one, the idea was we go faster. We have a joint clinical assessment one time, and that will speed up already market access. What we are seeing, which concerns us in the implementation discussions right now, is that there is not so much the idea of aligning behind one joint clinical assessment, but there's more an idea of adding some elements to the national assessments, which is only going to slow things down. And there are some detailed elements that we think really need to be worked on carefully during the implementation together with stakeholders. Things like early engagement between HTA bodies and the industry, make sure we understand what the requirements are, the parameters, so-called PICOs, and make sure that we have enough data to answer those parameters in the best possible way so that you have all the information you need and we can go as fast as quickly, but in a harmonized and knowledgeable way, like we do with other agencies, for example, the European Medicines Agency, there's very early engagement. So a lot of things on the plate from my side. You'll be hearing of some important developments during the event today. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. It would have been really my pleasure to be able to listen directly, but I know that I will get the information as well, and I'm looking forward to reading that. I think we have a great opportunity at the moment. We have a piece of legislation that we're revising for the first time in 20 years, and probably the last time in the next 20 years. We can close that gap with other regions that are pulling away the innovation and the R&D from us. And we can make sure that this industry, which is then an engine also for the generic industry in that life cycle of innovation, is strong in Europe as well. And we are resilient, and we don't rely on other parts of the world to export their medicines to us at some point. This is an industry that employs 850,000 people directly and 2.5 million indirectly. And we also are the biggest contributor to the positive trade balance of Europe with 215 billion in 2022. So let's make sure that we have those clinical trials in Europe for our patients, that we have that research in Europe, that we have that loop, the right ecosystem. And we really look forward to working with all our colleagues at Inpharma, but beyond all the stakeholders and the government of Poland and the others to make access better and access to innovation better in Europe. Thank you again, and I wish you a fantastic discussion.
I think there will not be shortage of these opportunities for discussions, because we have the 20th anniversary of the accession to the EU. It's also a meeting connected with the upcoming Polish presidency. You probably don't remember the one 10 years ago, and this will be very interesting, and this is what we are going to discuss with my guests and your guests. Mateusz Oczkowski, the Deputy Director for the Medicine Policy, Ministry of Health. The water is coming, so you will have plenty to water your throat with. Professor Maciej Banach, the President of Polish Society of Nephrology. Katarzyna Pustek, the Director of Legal Department. Juliusz Krzyżanowski, expert Baker McKenzie. Artur Fałek, from the Advisory Chancery. Professor Marcin Czech, the president of the Pharma Economic Association Poland, mentioned already by Minister Miłkowski, Agnieszka Grzybowska, the president of the employer of the innovative pharma companies, and Director Michał Beliniak from Inpharma. So I will have the same request. If you want to discuss in between yourselves, I would like to make sure that I'm not dominating this discussion. And this time we are going towards the future, and then we'll come back to recollections, because we will soon have a Polish presidency at a very specific juncture. We had this concerns that will be mostly about the security, but maybe also the security of the pharma market. So what will be the priorities when it comes to the priorities in your area? President Grzybowska-Zalewska. Thank you very much. Well, this is an important topic. When we take a look at what are the priorities, as we see it here, and we have been discussing for many years, we are talking about the prevention. We've been talking about the prevention a lot. How much we are doing is a different question. We saw it in the data which we presented, that also here the situation may be improving when it comes to the accessibility of the prevention. And I think that taking advantage of this opportunity that we are going to be in this presidency, apart from the security or the medicine security, we should take this health outside to make sure that our presidency has health as its priority, or this is one of the important aspects that the member states are dealing with. Well, in the past, it wasn't so obvious. The health was overlooked, and the pandemic has changed it. It used to be a domestic competency, and well, it is not such a great priority, actually. We are talking a lot about it, but I'm wondering how many activities follow. For us, it seems obvious, but the question is whether the people from outside the industry see it as an obvious. So first is prophylactics and prevention. The second thing, competitiveness that we were talking about, and Natalie Moll was already talking about that. We need to retain this innovation in Europe to make sure that we are the area which not only has this technological know-how, but also has an access to innovation therapies. And what was earlier mentioned by Director Beliniak, access to innovative therapies is all about securing the medicine safety security, because most of the APIs also come from Europe. So all the regulations which are around the competitiveness, and also highlighting this is a great place for investment, both production innovations, but also finding new molecules. And the third part, finally, is digital transformation and transition. And I think we have much to boast. We can be a leader and to show in Europe what are our achievements, and we can be a precursor. So I think that I would like to make sure that the health is one of the priorities of Polish presidency. Professor Banach, you are. I would like to welcome everyone. Thank you for the invite. I really dream, quite honestly, given especially during the previous presidency in 2011, I participated, and I know well that we had some priorities, and 13 years, not much have changed apart from digitization and AI, but it was then that we were talking a lot about prophylactics and prevention. So for 13 years, nothing has been done when it comes to prophylactics. And of course, I would like to find some positive elements, and I will probably find them. But when we take a look at this comprehensive system, and we take a look at the end user, which is the patient, then of course there are no elements which would testify to the progress. I don't know whether you are aware of the OECD report from 2023. And we are trailing behind in Europe in terms of the number of preventable deaths. It's about more than 30. 220 is for the lack of prevention and prophylactics. We have the worst situation when it comes to possible preventable hospitalization, 700 per 100,000. And I don't know whether you are aware, we have probably the largest number of beds, hospital beds, per 1,000 citizens. And we know that in every powiat, in every city, the city wants to have the court, the hospital, and the treasury office. So this is how it looks. If we don't take a systemic approach, and as you've said, if we fail to say that health, also from the point of view of the health, safety, and security, because it is difficult to understand that we are a front line country. We have so many refugees and many health refugees. I don't know whether you realize that the vaccination of refugees is so much lower, and also the level of the infectious diseases that they display is also different. So when we also add the fact that hopefully the conflict, and if the conflict, moves towards us, this health, safety, and security is crucial to create the conditions to receive the refugees, but also to create the conditions where we can take proper care of health. So moving away from the conflict element, even though it is quite difficult to move away from that. Today I heard an interview that we already have a hybrid war in Poland. We have to say a few words about prophylactics.
If the Polish government, regardless of who is in power, will fail to look at health as a priority, and whichever government, they always shy away from major healthcare reforms, there is a big reticence to perform big reform in the healthcare, then we will not achieve positive change. During presidency, we have to give good examples. There was an announcement since 2025 of introducing health education in schools. Let's use existing solutions when it regards primary prophylaxis. We already have some coordination in the National Health Fund and in the primary healthcare setting. If the primary care doctor does not tackle the patient or is not able to tackle the patient, they send the patient to a specialized care center. So is this concordant with the Ministry of Health vision in terms of the presidency? Do you have the same agenda? Well, in general, I can speak only for the Department of Drug Policy. But if I look from the standpoint of my own opinion, I think it's difficult to be the voice of reason when you come from a country which trails behind. But if we have implementation of true prophylaxis in Poland, then certainly such activities will be beneficial for Poland. I agree with the professor that prophylaxis is in a sorry state in Poland, and until we realize that, I don't think that will happen during the presidency, then, well, we are not going to be credible. We should take into account or tap this situation as an opportunity due to the multiple meetings and conversations that we will have during presidency, and we should carry over these examples to our home turf. and initiate in Poland certain activities. So, if I may, I agree it is difficult to be an example when you're not, but every change, any change, will be noticeable. I wanted to say something positive. I was unable to finish that thought previously. We have 6-7 months, but if we have certain tools, maybe I'm gullible, but if the Minister of Health said, yes, coordinated primary prevention is to take flight before the presidency, then that would be what happened. Yes, the patients in primary care setting should have access to coordinated care. Due to coordinated care in the primary health care setting, we will reduce the caseload in the specialized treatment centers, and we would therefore reduce the number of hospitalizations. And if at every stage we added education, well, Professor, I think my perspective is such that prophylaxis should be a national exercise, while the presidency also has to address a pharmaceutical review. Madam, let me just interrupt again. I would not like to have this kind of meeting during the presidency. I'm not talking about this meeting, where we are going to debate again, as we have been doing for the past 20 years. In the context of the presidency, I would like us to say, yes, we have already made a solution which we are starting to implement. We want to have support during the learning curve, but if we are just going to discuss, if we are just going to show problems that we have been showing for the past 20 or 30 years, then this presidency will again fail to bring fruit. We have 7 months to actually reach that situation. Yes, in the area of prevention, I am not the person, but you are responsible for the pharmaceutical review. Yes, I am. Yes, we want to define some kind of collaboration between the generic and innovative industry. We want the innovative companies to invest in Europe. We have increased access to drugs. The list of challenged access drugs and also the IT solutions which have to or are to get money from the European Union programs. So this is an unfortunate period because it comes together with a revamping of 50% of the reimbursement list. We are going to have a lot of work, but we are determined to actually see that happen. And in the Department of Drug Policy, we are promising to deliver. Yes, Professor Czech, I'm looking at you because a few weeks ago, some important decisions were made in this context. What is your take on the chances that all the decisions on drug policy are to be taken during the Polish presidency? I think that the issues of drug policy form a continuum which during the Polish presidency, actually, well, I don't expect some major acceleration or deceleration for that matter, but looking at the pharma market from the perspective of a quarter of a century, I already turned gray in the process. It was the most interesting period, maybe since the implementation of the reimbursement law, which Artur will certainly discuss in a moment. This was an interesting time. The pharmaceutical package reform, which generates great expectations, is also catalyzer of change in the European drug policy, and drawing on what the president of EFIA said, the streamlining of incentives, but also providing a more equitable access to drugs in all member states. We were never a state which had some special preference or rapidity of market access. This is recently changing. But commenting on the data that were presented, if we just focus on the most recent period, the period under the governance of the praised Minister Miłkowski, or to a longer time window, we see that the time to market has been shortened. There is some backlog that has been part of the calculations. But if we look at what is more recent, then in the terms of access to the market, we have a much better situation. Joint clinical access is also something that we could have a more meaningful conversation about, because it's rather late to start these things from scratch. We will have to see some changes in legislation. The ministry is planning on that, but also the changes of guidelines have to be prepared. A lot is happening in the European dimension of drug policy, and the Polish drug policy also things are happening. And I remember times, as I said, I'm grey. By now, we had a director who was touring Europe saying that we are spending less every year on reimbursement. And they were very proud of that, but there was no new addition, no innovative drugs added to the reimbursement list for 5 years. So now we are very happy to see access to novel drugs. Previously, it was only generics that were introduced, so the world has changed for us completely. I am very happy with that change. We were talking at the previous panel about a very concrete matter. I don't want to elaborate, although I could. We are living in interesting times, times of intense work, because both geopolitically, as the professor mentioned, the situation is not conducive, but drug security is a very significant part of state security of Poland. Let's imagine a situation where we run out of insulin. This will be more effective than being bombarded, than the Russians bombarding us with Iskander missiles. And the discussion in Europe about APIs, but we have discussed on the side that these data are too optimistic because they relate only to some of the manufacturers who are possibly boasting the highest level of awareness. And this is not the last thing on the list in the context of the presidency, but my last sentence. We can boast about digitization, and I am not so surprised in the lack of progress in terms of public health, because we have only recently started spending more money. It's still not enough. The populational level was not addressed for so many years. So if this is to be an impulse for us to do more, to really start in the first place, then that's good. 20 billion is earmarked for the healthcare system out of 700 million in the
Bardzo dziękuję. To ja chciałabym jeszcze wrócić do pana dyrektora i pani prezes w kontekście europejskiego pakietu.
In the TPO. So hopefully this package will be seen through during the Polish presidency. What risks do you see? I'm talking about patent protection, but also other aspects in the package, because we are also taking over after Hungary, which is maybe a threat. Well, let's see what Hungary is able to deliver in its presidency. because various things are happening also in the area of European legislation. So what are the challenges? We have been discussing them for a long time. What is the key or the fundamental aspect, fundamental for the future? The 700 drugs that I showed on my slide, the question is how many of these drugs will actually become reality. We were talking about the value of innovation. Why is this? Because we want to develop new drugs to give patients the opportunity to access treatment, but the limitations can reduce the appetite to innovate in companies. Well, any type of protection on the pharma market, we're talking chiefly about innovative drugs, they are there to provide a continuity in the developing and research about new molecules. That is fundamental. What is the driving force for new therapies? The protection is one of those important factors. And when we look at rare and ultra-rare diseases, in this area, regulations were developed to incentivize, to prolong the duration of protection, and that led to a fundamental change. And reimbursement decisions were made. We don't have so effective mechanisms in antibiotic therapy. We have no new antibiotics, and this is a very good example. We can also find a negative example. It is a happy turn that the EU has started a discussion about supporting development of new antibiotics. Yes, antibiotics are exactly the flip side of what we're talking about here. Thank you for the example. Yes, an unequal balance, a skewed balance in the European Union, which will be instated now, are likely to be improved only 15 years later, when things will already have the time to go wrong, because the United States and Asia are going to do their thing. Yes, I have recently heard that even the UK, despite Brexit, is the place where stuff is going to happen. Yes, Europe has finished its leading role, or ended its leading role, and now we are just trying to catch up to retain what we have. We would like to have more patents being established in Europe, more than there are today, not more than in the United States, because that's probably not possible. But R&D activities should be incentivized in Europe, but our researchers should participate. Looking at the potential of Poland, I have no doubt as to the claim that we are not sufficiently exploited, so to say, in the pharma R&D. The new commission wants to have an EU health commission established, so that matter will be addressed. And I agree with Professor Banach, who said that let's put something on the table. Let's underline that it's ours, looking at small operational changes via big ideas. Yes, women's health was something that also worked well in other presidencies. Well, we're working in a triad, and this is a triad which should continue, and we are the first. Well, there are two different countries along with us with a different approach and different needs. Different approach to innovation too, but Poland has the opportunity to address certain directions of the discussion, provided that the dynamics of the legislative process will be adequate. The presidency lasts only 6 months, only or as much as 6 months. Yes, I agree with Professor Banach. We have to come with ready documents. We can't start discussions, and we just have to work on convincing others to apply them. So that's to we have a different DG, but maybe soon we will have a new DG where Poland will have more say. Looking at the national market, looking at Ms. Kaczmarczyk, if the European pharmaceutical package actually was passed, at the time of the Polish presidency, are we talking about a realistic change in access, or is this just talk? Well, because I am butting into a discussion that is already ongoing, and important things have been voiced. I just would like to point out one matter. Europe is ripe for change. The revision of the pharma law is a sequel of certain situations which took us by surprise, like COVID, war. And this led to creating, even before the legislative package was developed, this led to developing a document like a pharma strategy for Europe, and this lists priorities which were to be the focus of work for future legislation. And the access to drugs was named to be one of the most important priorities. Providing access, drug security certainly, minimization of regulatory barriers, that too, and the discussions that we are having today, discussions about the specific content of regulations, follow from experience collected so far. The Belgian presidency has started to target shortages. They want to wrap up this matter. I don't think that is possible to wrap up the matter of incentives. Now moving on to a summary. Today we already have a draft proposal from the Commission. The next thing that we have to take into account is the position of the Parliament. What will be developed in the Council and what is going to be the base for future trialogues is still in the offing, because we don't know what the triad will be. The Parliament made it before elections. Out of 6 years of exclusivity, the Parliament went forward to 7.5 years. There is a chaos regarding the prolongation of these periods. I do agree with the previous speakers that we have to assure an environment, legal environment, which on the one hand would
ensure the certainty of the regulatory environment, because that translates into the certainty of business planning. This is everything is connected here, and all the aspects needs to be ironed out. And when it comes to the presidency, everyone believes that we will be finalizing this work. I'm not sure about that. Most likely what seems to me will be the trilogues. But as I said before, what will be the position of the Council, we don't know yet. Thank you for this comment. Well, talking about the presidency today is quite challenging, because we are looking at the election in 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, we will have more certainty. Well, the last time in the EU has changed much in our mentality. And I would like to pose a question to Mr. Fałek. What do you think is the balance of the last 20 years in terms of the pillars of the medicine policy? Hello, everyone. Well, my personal take is that this is an advantageous balance. The sheer accession to the EU was cheered by everyone, but then the presence in the EU forced us to work very hard and adjusting to the EU law as it was at that time elevated the level of our administration considerably, and as a result we saw the emergence of the new institutions and we saw the training of the people who would be ready to work for these institutions. We had expert visits, several hundreds of them were involved in this. We had internships abroad for our officials. So thanks to all of that, we were able to catch up with Europe, and we were under threat of financial sanctions if we were not to be in compliance, but we were able to achieve it. And from my standpoint, a milestone was the passage of the Reimbursement Act. We had a chaos in terms of reimbursement before, and implementation of the European law, which was mostly what the Reimbursement Act was all about, created the foundations of the system, which is in place till this day. Today we had this. We were celebrating Minister Miłkowski, and I'm pleased that somebody can appreciate the minister responsible for the medicine policy. It's not a given. Maybe this was also about the style, PR, but for me, as somebody who was responsible for operational part, it is nothing strange that he's making reimbursement decisions. So this is his duty. It's also a matter of our expenditures on the medicines, and there is still much to be done. And this is also a matter of the medicinal policy, which was drawn up, taken over by the government, but not fully implemented. So there is so many more things to do. So I'm not concerned or biases vis-à-vis the EU legislation. The Transparency Directive of 1988 has not changed. The regulations were so universal at that time, they were so flexible that they still cover the regulatory systems and regimes in many countries. Also, the adjustment to the pharma law, it is important that it is good. But we have to remember that this will be the common legacy of the whole of Europe. We can try to propose certain solutions, try to convince to them, but eventually it will be the consent of all of us to adopt the new pharma law, and then everyone will have to fall in line and adjust to this. I saw that you are scribbling something. Well, I'm just preparing to what will happen after the conference. Well, I scribbled a lot. I wanted to refer to what Professor Banach said. I don't know whether you remember. We've been talking for a dozen or so years, circling back to the same topics, and it is in public domain that the ministry wants to create a coordinated care department. And maybe some of the proposals you will be able to issue there. Another thing that's missing is indirect costs. Well, you created the foundation of the Reimbursement Act I don't know whether you remember January 2012. This was a nervous time, first revision. 12 years passed, and it's been implemented. And now we would like to make sure that some of the regulations which were adopted in November, we would like to see them unchanged because they were quite okay. This is one thing, because we are talking here about what we await in terms of the European perspective. We will have to implement directives and to make it possible to implement this regulation. The assessment of the regulations, well, we've been talking 1 year about this package, and after a year, we are pleased that we are back to the status quo, which has been there for 20 years. Whether revision is a revision or what we are driving at, what is the target? One of the companies recently showed the data that the US is responsible for 50% of the drug market, of the overall drug market in value. So 4% of population is responsible for 50% of the value of the drug. European organizations, while summarizing the package, which was adopted by the parliament, say that directly. So it is difficult to imagine that limiting the incentives, which are the main element that we were talking about in the context of what should change in the regulations. How should we perceive it in the context whether it is in the best interest of Europe? FPR Europa Bio, in the long-term perspective, it can reduce the investment potential of Europe, or as a result, the limitation to the access to the modern access. Well, one more number. 20 years ago, between EU and US, the difference was 2 billion. Now it's 25 billion, the difference when it comes to the expenditures. Also, R&D in the US exceed the combined European, Japanese, so we are not able to even come close. We are talking about small little things, and we are not focusing on the long term. Well, the context is keying in the whole discussion. It's important to say that the United States have the exclusivity right for biological drugs, 12 years. This is the longest. Why it is so important? Because, well, when the new drugs are being created, they are mostly biological drugs. And when we think what they do to foster this, they are making sure they have a long period of exclusivity. But since, well, we were singing praises to Mr. Minister, but never to Mr. Fałek. I wanted to make some amends. Not many remember, and I identify him. We had a small group of people during the time of Mr. Fałek. They had 3 teams, and we were discussing as partners what we should put in the law, what will work out and what will not. It was back then in 2011. At the beginning, earlier, we had the open tuning project. And I'm saying that because 12 years ago, 13 years ago, we were able to create a cooperation model which was successful. Of course, we had differences of opinion, but when I revisit this time, it was a time when at the ministry we had a very partnership relations with, and Artur Fałek has contributed to this. This is a certain practice which really struck me, that you can conduct a legislative process in an open way. We have the practice right now, meeting with the members of the new team, and it turns out that I think we are hoping that we'll have benefits of someone else. Thank you, Michał. This is not what I was after when I said that it is the task of the minister to make the reimbursement decisions. But I just wanted to use this opportunity to say one more thing, because we have both upcoming presidency and the current activities. What was the difficulty in 2011 when we had the first list, issuing the decision for all the medicines for the first time, and it was juxtaposed with the presidency. Well, so I warn you, you should not plan an intense department activity before the renewal of the decision. We were issuing the decisions in December 2011, and in the middle of December we had a conference organized largely by the department. What is really needed is sharing the resources between the domestic and European directions, and in the course of our presidency we'll have to deal with the medicinal question on both fronts. And I have to mention about the significant role of the registration office at the European level. The legal department was very helpful and largely was conducting the legislative work, and I wasn't dealing with such a large revision of the European law. Only when the VV directive was adopted with some implementing arrangements, then I had an opportunity to participate in this process of creation of EU law. So it's good to have ready proposal. It's good to have enough time on your hands and the possibility to discuss the proposals not only during official meetings but also unofficially, because this is where these things are hammered out and this is where you convince people. Because to that we also have a matter of clinical trials. Yeah, certainly. Thank you on behalf of the office for the nice words. I just wanted to draw your attention to one thing. We as an office, we are a substantive agency working and participating, obviously, in the discussions on priorities, plans, shaping this drug policy as an advisory voice. But actually what the director just mentioned, this fake directive, so to speak, well, is one of the last ones, because we have before pharmacovigilance, and then we have fake drug directives, and I'm talking about it in the context of the legislation regarding the drugs in people. Then we had veterinary products where in place of the directive we have some regulation. In case of human drugs we don't have it. Another thing, and I'm referring to clinical trials and the experience that we've had and that we will have to be prepared to. Previously we were working on the pharma law, and the years of experience connected with clinical trials in Europe have demonstrated that it is important to make sure that certain things are harmonized, and access to the whole life cycle of the clinical trial is unified. And it was some kind of trigger to create new regulations, ETIAS, and referring to what we are expecting and what kind of risks we are looking at. Let me tell you this, great value added is that we are part of this harmonized law. We face the same challenges, we have the same regulations, the same requirements. Some of the things are left to the national competency, but this regulation on clinical trials is already narrowing this decision-making leeway when it comes to national member states, and this was the goal. Whereas the participation of so many players, actors in this area is showing that this is good, because the more people we have on board in this area, then the more you can see inconsistencies, things which need to be improved, ironed out, and so on. And one of the things that would be helpful in the process of solidifying this European community, which would be attractive for clinical trials, is the ACT-EU initiative. So the common initiatives of European Commission and European Drug Agency of the member states, which are brought together under the network of regulators, and the aim is to help in exchange of experiences, improving and bridging all the gaps that we see when we apply the registration procedure under the current platform, improving the functionality, but also incorporating the members of clinical trials into, well, fostering this cooperation between both committees at MEI, which have advisory role, task force group, and representatives of coordinating group of heads, so that this area of clinical trial is well taken care for, not from the stage of submitting an application, but much earlier. This is one of the elements that we are expecting when it comes to the strengthening of this area.
Yes, I think we are having an overlap of the 20th anniversary and the presidency. But as Mr. Falk said, we have to address this nationally because we're in for a new amendment. And now the question to Director Falkowski, what will be the direction of change in the reimbursement law? I think the context is very important. The law is in force since 2012, and there were various approaches to changing the content. And I have looked at Economic Committee reports since 2011. The first report contained practically all the postulates which have been introduced since the 1st of November 2023. So first of all, this was a dream of the authors, the legislators, but this was introduced after more than a dozen years later. And I see a tendency to dream looking into the past. What was created should last forever. We had a meeting with innovative companies, and we heard from them that stagnant situations are absolutely counterproductive. So for the last 12 years, I can't remember seeing a new order in this area since 2012. We are talking about prosthetic solutions, which are pasted to articles that are already in existence, and sometimes the results are laughable, and we have Gordian knots, which are ever tighter in the departments of the ministry. Some ideas should never be put on the table, but when it comes to reflection, if somebody comes with a completely new idea from day one, completely different, that is nothing evil. You represent innovative companies, and I say to my employees that we should avoid stagnant situations. And like Professor Miłkowski, who has been working on the basis of the law on reimbursement, I think he exploited it to the limits. Yes, you're adding laudation. Yes, I am. He's my boss. Well, we have been saying goodbye to him year on year, but I think this is our last goodbye. I think this is the final departure. Maybe not forever. Maybe he will not be the deputy minister. Maybe he will be the minister himself, because he actually proved that he could learn everything. Usually a new minister or deputy minister is completely green. As a rookie, they have to learn. Some of them don't. But the responsibility is not with the highest civil servants like a deputy minister. They have to take directions, but they have to trust their personnel. The minister has an hour or two to take a decision. If he or she does not trust personnel, if the personnel doesn't work in a trustful setting, when is my technology coming? When are we going to be able to boast that our project has seen light? So they keep pinging me for me to give them some kind of success, and I never thought that the Minister Miłkowski will put so much trust in me. I was supposed to come there for a moment to look at the ministry and then run away, like most people do that when they come to the Ministry of Health. And due to the fact that we actually had the opportunity to change things, to make relevant changes, which Minister Miłkowski made possible, and you see how many technologies have been reimbursed, how things have been accelerated. We were talking about the rapidity of introducing new technologies, and this has been shortened in 2021 from the date of approval to the implementation of a reimbursed technology. It took 5 years. Currently, it is 3 years plus. That still takes long, yes, but if we look at the cause for this delay, you can't review that because you don't know all the timelines. We would analyze winning 3-1 because we have to wait often over 900 days for the documentation to be submitted, while our work takes us 43 days. So the 900 days is our waiting time, our downtime. So if you want to make this much faster, if you think that this is part of your international fight, not necessarily. If you want to benefit from a longer protection, will you actually file in Poland? Why is Poland third last in this proceeding? Yes, we can say that 60 days is the overlap, or the excess time that we frequently have. But that is true for therapeutic programs. As it regards your reimbursement submissions, the time that is in our hands is nothing. So maybe you need to change. When I read that the ministry is trying to involve the company into discussions, asking the ombudsman, the children's ombudsman, and other institutions to spur the company onwards. I think that is not really sensible. Of course, we can create a stationary population, because if you plan well, you will never exceed 5%. But you can get an approval in Poland, leave Poland, and then have bespoke imports. So in order to avoid alternative access channels, we should speak about making a broad availability, or providing a broad availability. So Article 38 for medicinal technologies with demonstrated effectiveness who have lost exclusivity. They have never been brought for reimbursement. Those are older technologies, but the companies have lost time. The stats show that a therapy saw the market after 8 or 9 years, but is that good for the patient? And there is a designation by the FDA, the breakthrough therapies, and 118 breakthrough therapies were identified. We reimburse 48 of them, which is about 40%. That is a small number when it comes to breakthrough therapies. But if we dig deeper, 58 were never submitted for reimbursement in Poland. So a decision is the basis, but it is not the decision by the Minister of Health. It is the onus is always on the company to submit an application. If they don't do that, we cannot call on the company to actually make their decision. And as for reimbursement plans, we have ended pre-consults. Maybe I will give you the opportunity to speak again, but Mr. Beniak, Krzyżanowski, and Fałek spoke. Yes, as regards the possibility of summoning the company, and because the European documents actually were the documents were developed centrally to actually summon a company in a given country, rather than requiring a company to be present on 27 markets at the same time. So I think certain solutions can be developed, which on either side may address some problems. So in the debate which was held in the European Parliament, this direction was addressed, and if it will be introduced, implemented, then it will move in the right direction that we all want to see happening. Pharmaceutical companies also anticipate the budgetary situation, the payers' position, and all companies, if all companies were to be forced to apply in 27 countries, then again we would shift the responsibility to the I'm not sure if every government wants to take this on their back. And Artur Fałek and Juliusz Krzyżanowski. Let's bear in mind that the goal of the system is to provide access to drugs. What was said previously is a true problem. The break or the downtime is long due to the prolongation of the process, the stalling of the process, but also in terms of negotiation, decisions made in central boardrooms that the submission will be reviewed, changed. We also have a central approval process. If this is going to mean that reimbursement applications will have to be filed at the same time in all countries, members of the European Union, then possibly that will be solved. But the professor spoke about coordination. This was about coordination of services, but let us also look at coordinated access at the level of Europe. The issue of lack of access, the issue of non-continuous supplies, this is something happening in all countries, and coordination could be a good solution here. If we build security also relative to macro contingencies. So this is a solution that we have in Poland, monitoring of accessibility to drugs on our market, but there is no such solution on the European market. I think building something in other member states akin to our solution would be a good way forward. The ability to manufacture APIs, providing for alternative scenarios or alternative supply chains. I would not like this to be exploited, but when the war started in Ukraine, then I, as a person outside of the ministry, was asked how to provide drugs to Ukraine, how to organize supplies. Yes, Dariusz Krzyżanowski. I would like to relate to what Director Oczkowski said, because we're going to talk about this yet again. I think you underestimate the technology for highly innovative drug technologies. I think companies are amenable to incentives. Well, some companies said, no, we are not going to submit because we will be forced to continue therapy. So that was a deal breaker. But theoretical the theoretical incentives, like more flexibility on the part of the government, is a benefit that will lead to companies readily uptaking this path. It doesn't have to be 900 days, because if incentives will be put in place, then companies will be more ready to file their submissions. There are some aspects that we cannot discuss, of course, that explain some of the nitty-gritty, but from my perspective, this is a nice pathway. However, in the past 2 years, it was not used quite frequently. Some companies say, why was my technology not taken into that process? Just 2 sentences. Yes, the initial selection is open to criticism. Yes, one technology which was submitted, combined therapy, while the second component was not even approved. How am I supposed to reimburse that? Are we going to wait for 180 days for it to be approved? How do I select that? Madam Professor Szef, about the directions of the reimbursement law, yes, I will also ask you for one last sentence about cardiology. Yes, we have so many subjects that we could stay here until the late evening, but relating to what the director said, looking at innovative companies, we would all like to file as soon as possible. And you have a comparison of the substances that were submitted, say, 80 years ago. Not many companies are interested in that, but when it comes to innovative therapies, when we look at companies, what we have to provide to the market, we are all very keen to have it done as quickly as possible. So we will try to submit much quicker, earlier for the innovative therapies, but we also need to take into account that we're going to do it in parallel with other member states. And the next issue about the 20 years of the reimbursement law, which was probably burdened with blood, sweat, and tears. So we, looking at the current novelty or novel amendment of the reimbursement law, we are going to strike a consensus, and that will certainly improve access. Professor Czech, a few words from me. I think that what the ministry is after is to provide as quickly as possible, as effectively as possible, and at the lowest price, new drugs. And I'm not surprised that European legislation went into the process of, or requesting the process of, parallel filings in all countries. But if we look at the European Union, we would have to run a pilot exercise where the unmet need is largest, like rare diseases, and we should try to make orphan drugs accessible at the same time in all member states. We will not be able to avoid discussions about a fair price, what it is, and how we can unify access, but this should be the first step, which will probably be followed by other steps. I think vaccines, should be made part of that when we're talking about prevention. And so I think striking a consensus between all of the stakeholders are in everybody's interest. And it's only the details that need to be worked on. So Professor Roszkowski will say something about the reimbursement law. Relating to what was said, I think the coordinated care department will never take flight, because I think that would be duplication of the work of the drug policy department. I understand what the character of this session is. We were talking about drug that is disease, but we said initially that 60% of all preventable deaths could be prevented by prophylaxis. We were talking about drug security, because I remembered that drug security, nobody was ready to talk about drug security after the war in Ukraine started. And I don't see investment of pharma companies in Poland that would provide security. And yes, I don't see in the pipeline, which anything made by Polfa Tarchomin, which is still governed by the state. I don't see any antibiotics being developed. I heard that we have not introduced many molecules. Yes, I introduced 70 molecules, but abroad, because the Polish state has no support for that. I hope that Professor Fendler and others will develop such conditions so as to support mature projects, making it possible for them to at least conclude their first phase randomized studies. I have been responsible for dozens of randomized studies. I would like to see the day when Polish researchers will have their own initiated studies, randomized studies. So I want clinical trials to be run in Poland because this is the key both for innovation and for drug security.
Ale niestety już nie mogę.
Well, now I'll get it over to Director Oczkowski. What's the vision of the revision of the Reimbursement Act? Well, as I said, we received 260 pages of the proposal of the changes when it comes to the Reimbursement Act. 23 units chimed in. We asked more than 30. And as a matter of fact, the expectations are similar to wishful thinking. And we also already heard that. Let's reverse everything and then we will be all put in jail by the anti-corruption service. So this is not a possible perspective, but we met the most important representatives of this milieu, and the list of the wishes was much shorter. So I think we know what is your expectations. We'll stick to it, and we'll hope that we'll be able to solve the most important problems which were raised during discussions, and are also reflected in our announcement, because sometimes you have to issue announcements which are not a source of the law. So it's a self-consuming snake. So you are not expecting a revolution. Well, I see a revolution coming. We will propose something new. We need new modes to encourage application submitting. Multi-criterion analysis, we are eyeing at this, but we are not going to go this way when it comes to the increase of the spending, because we are still thinking about the increases of margins to 8%, and an expectation of increasing percentage from 15 to 90. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you. If you have any questions, please ask them informally. Thank you for the discussion. And I can say it was Make Europe Great Again. Mateusz Oczkowski from the Ministry of Health, Professor Banach, Katarzyna Postęp-Kaczmarczyk, Juliusz Krzyżanowski, Artur Fałek, Professor Marcin Czech, President of Infarma, and Mr. Bylniak. And we invite you next year, or at least hope to invite you. Well, we wish you all the best and have a successful year in Europe.